My name is Steve Bilogan. I am an engineer working on the Uno platform. I'm excited today to talk to you about how we can utilize the power of C# and XAML and bring that experience and those capabilities to all platforms. So let's just go ahead and get started. This is probably a slide you see a lot of when we're talking about cross-platform development frameworks. So the big problem domain that we're really trying to tackle is when you have projects that sort of stretch across multiple platforms. And some of those problems are that there's a potential for, or there's a large potential for effort duplication there, since we need to re-implement logic for each individual platform that we're targeting, whether that's the web or Linux or iOS or Mac or Android. Another scenario when we're talking about these sort of projects would be legacy business applications. So a lot of people want to take these legacy business applications and migrate them to, or bring them to the 21st century. And this could lead to very high rewrite costs. And so a lot of legacy apps are now being brought to the web, thanks to things like WebAssembly, which we'll get into in a little bit, and we'll talk about what that is. Another thing in this problem domain is you really have to take into account the skill set of your current team and the training, available training for the technologies and the availability of developers for those technologies that you'd like to use. So if you're predominantly a .NET shop and you want to target multi-platform or multiple platforms, you have to take that into consideration. And so these 3 points really are what we like to see, or we like to say that Uno is a good solution for these 3 points. Since Uno platform is what we like to call truly universal. And so what is meant by that is that we believe that WinUI, which I'll get into in just a second, WinUI is the best UI framework built from the ground up with responsiveness and adaptiveness in mind, which means that by leveraging this Microsoft's WinUI framework, you can have something working on small devices all the way up to large 4K screens and everything in the middle. So it's really built for that adaptiveness for any sort of form factor. And so with Uno, what we're trying to do, or what we are doing, is we are building this bridge for this WinUI technology to bring it to all other platforms, not only just Windows, therefore making WinUI truly universal. So I mentioned WinUI a few times. And I would just like to get us sort of all on a baseline understanding of what WinUI is. So I'll quickly go through some slides that were taken from Ryan Demopoulos' talk at UnoConf 2020, which should be available online. I believe it's on YouTube. But I'll try my best to do as good a job as he did. But so over the years, from a Windows perspective, there's been about 4 major UX UI frameworks. So first there was MFC, then there's WinForms, and then the big one came along with WPF in 2006. Which introduced XAML, the markup language for basically defining your UI, a sophisticated animation system. Sorry, it's something in my throat. Data binding, new layouting. It was really a fountain of innovation for building Windows applications. Then in 2012 came UWP XAML came along. And so it's similar in nature, but an evolution of WPF as a framework. So it introduced things like the Fluent UI design system, more advanced animations. It had new controls that really went above and beyond what WPF offered. And so UWP, one of the big catches here is that UWP XAML was created for UWP apps. So when I talk about UWP apps, I mean Universal Windows Platform. Those Windows 10 store applications that are running in that sandbox, you get it from the Microsoft Store. And so there are basically 2 types of applications. When you're talking about Windows application development, you're talking about those Windows 10 store apps, those Windows UWP applications, and those Windows desktop Win32 apps. So I can't think of a good example, but anyway, like those native Win32 desktop applications that you're used to, before Windows 10. And so the fact that UWP XAML was built for UWP apps and it was baked into the operating system itself led to some challenges. So like I just mentioned, it can't be used by all app types. So there's a huge audience of desktop and Win32 developers for Windows that that aren't able to basically use the latest and greatest and most modern UI UX stack that you want for Windows application development. One of the big challenges, like I just mentioned, is that it is baked directly into the Windows operating system itself. The UWP UX UI framework is baked into the OS itself, so it's hard to deliver new features. So if there's a new control that gets introduced in a newer version of the library or of the framework, or a new feature, it needs to actually ship with a new version of Windows itself. And so not everyone always runs the latest version of Windows, so some features don't get adopted to the mass market on day one. And lastly, because UWP Xaml is baked into or ships with the OS itself, you can get some inconsistent behavior across versions of the operating systems. So when you're trying to target your application, when you're building it for specific operating systems, you might lose out on some features, or some features might have bugs or different ways of working across different versions of the operating system. So it's really a compatibility nightmare. So with all that in mind, with those disadvantages in mind, this is where the WinUI library came to be. It's a library of just controls and styles. So, so pre-built controls that you can use to plop into your application and have them, rich and usable by the user, and some styles. And it's built on top of the UWP Xaml framework, but it's decoupled from the Windows OS itself. So this individual WinUI 2 library here, they basically made a library that's decoupled from the OS, but still sits on top of UWP Xaml, so it still has that tie to the Windows operating system itself. And so this solves some of the challenges that were mentioned previously. So you're able to backport features on day one, regardless of the OS version within this library. You have a consistent behavior since you have one central location for the controls and everything like that are in this library. So things like, things like number box that are in the WinUI 2 library, you have one central location for that implementation, so it doesn't change across different operating system versions. And basically, you have the flexibility to ship these new features and fixes whenever, so it's no longer tied to the operating system release cycle. And so UWP Xaml, along with this standalone library that was called WinUI, is what we refer to as WinUI 2, even though there was no technical WinUI 1 really. So this is the second generation of WinUI. So this is when we talk about WinUI 2, this is what we're talking about, this still tied to the operating system with the main core of the framework, but a standalone library along with it that has some extra features and extra controls and extra styles. And so along comes WinUI 3. I lost myself. So the next step would be to basically decouple all of the WinUI framework, so that everything, so all the controls, all the building blocks of building an application, decouple that completely from the operating system itself. And this is where WinUI 3 comes into play. And this is taking that second gen WinUI, lifting it all out of the OS and bringing all the UX features into a decoupled library. And that is what we call WinUI 3, which is what's happening right now in the world. It's coming out with Project Reunion, and it's coming out in early stages right now. And so one final thing that we have as this large distinguishing characteristic of WinUI 3 over WinUI 2 is that WinUI 3, WinUI moving forward, that's what I'll be mentioning is WinUI 3, can work across all types of app types, so including Win32 and desktop applications. So you can build Windows 10 Store UWP applications or Win32 desktop applications using this single library. And it's everything you'll need for building for building your UI. And so now that we have sort of a baseline understanding of what I'm talking about when I say WinUI, I can answer some of the questions of what is Uno and how are we taking these features and capabilities of WinUI and how we're bringing them above and beyond Windows to all platforms. So just as a quick one-liner, Uno Platform is an open source project which helps enterprise developers build single codebase C# and WinUI Xaml applications for non-Windows platforms. So Uno is built on top of .NET, and it also takes advantage of the great Windows platform features such as accessibility, touch, keyboard management, focus management, I already said accessibility, as well as rich controls that come out of the box, like calendar and grid and charts coming from things like the Windows Community Toolkit or third-party vendors like Infragistics and Syncfusion. And so I said before that Uno Platform is what we like to say is truly universal, since we're bringing this WinUI framework above and beyond Windows to all platforms. We also mean that it's truly native. And so we actually sit on top of the native stacks. We're not just trying to draw pixels here in all cases. We want to make sure that we get all the native behaviors of gestures, of accessibility, copy paste, all those things. So when you're using Uno, and we have Uno here, you see it's stretching across all these new platforms that WinUI doesn't connect to right now. We're still sitting and we're still rendering out native HTML objects in the DOM. We're still using UIKit and AppKit for macOS and iOS. We're using the Android Views engine, so you're still getting those. You're still building an app using the WinUI contracts, but you're still getting those rich integrations and rich controls that are coming from the individual operating systems and platforms that you're running on. So you don't lose out on any of that richness. And we wanted to reach even more platforms and more backends. So we leveraged Skia as a backend to bring WinUI to even more platforms. So now WinUI can be bridged to over to things like Linux and build WPF applications and build apps for Windows 7 as well. And we'll get into Skia in a little bit, and I'll show you some fun stuff about that. So this is just, again, to drive home this truly native talk that I'm talking about here. So in the case of the application developer, they'd be basically at this level, they would be defining a text block like they would. But really with the magic of Uno, what's happening underneath these like calm waters is that we're getting a UI label from the iOS app or UI kit. We're getting a text view from the Android Views engine. We're generating an HTML paragraph for the HTML DOM. And same idea as with platform APIs so it's not only the UI, it's also platform APIs that we cover as well. So you're using the settings storage APIs from Windows, but really what's happening behind the scenes is you're using the platform specific APIs and the native APIs for the platforms that you're running on. And I see some questions, and I'm going to get to them in a second. And so just as a quick example of like what it looks like that we're trying to do here, we're actually running out of room on the slide as we add more platforms. But basically, you have this a small piece of WinUI XAML code where you're just defining a grid layout and a text block as a label and a slider control, and that's basically it. You define that once, and it gets compiled, and it runs on every single platforms that we support. And you can see out of the box it has that same look and feel across all the platforms, which is totally up to you whether you want that or you want native feel or you want different feels for different platforms. It's all up to you. But out of the box, this is what you would get, and it runs natively on all the other platforms as well. And so I want to answer these questions really badly, but I want to do this slide because I like this slide. So there's no better way to start talking about Uno than at the pixel level, and we'll do a little bit of the comparison, but I have a bigger comparison and talk about what these questions are about in a second. So in 2021, we believe that designers and developers should be able to control how apps look, even when using multi-platform frameworks. And so that's really important. And so there are multiple strategies on the market that try to do this in different ways. I just want to talk about some of these strategies and where Uno Platform sort of lands within them. And so at one end of the spectrum here, you have this native rendering. So things like React Native or Xamarin, like is mentioned. And so basically, there's people creating abstractions on top of the native platforms, and they basically just let the native platform control the rendering without too much control over the way your views will look. And so, like I mentioned, that's like the Xamarin way of doing things. And the React Native way of doing things, we sort of abstract away from the native part, and it has its own language and its own APIs and stuff that deal with and talk to the native stack like usual. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have this canvas rendering. And so basically there, you just slap a canvas on the screen and you just draw every single pixel yourself. So every single pixel, if you're drawing a button, you have to draw the button and do all that. And so you lose some of those native behaviors like copy paste or localization or accessibility, say. So you're not getting those rich controls from the native platform that are there for you to use. You're not getting that anymore. And you basically have to rewire things yourself and get that working yourself. And so what we believe is that Uno fits really in the middle of these. So it takes a little from both. And it's really at the crossroads of native and pixel perfect. And so why we think it's really at this crossroads here is because of things, because that we're relying on WinUI as a framework. It has things like control templating to offer or lookless controls. So basically, you say, I want a button, it still goes down to the native stack and it gets that rich button that has all those capabilities and all that accessibility features and everything that's there from the platform itself. But it also gives you a blank canvas to say, you can make this button look however you want. You have complete control over its look and feel, but you still get all the richness coming from the operating or the platform that you're running on. And so basically, we are implementing the API service. So when we're talking about Uno Platform and we're saying all these things, basically what we're doing is we're implementing the API surface of the UWP framework or WinUI. And so there are many UI APIs. So like from all the small basic primitive controls to the large ones. So there's text block, image, stack panel, grid, navigation view as they get more complex. But there's also a large API service for non-UI. So things like file access or geosensor, depending on which platforms and devices you're targeting, you get certain different sensors and things like that. So it's a very, very large API surface. And basically, we're building it for each of these platforms to conform to those contracts that are defined by WinUI. And so you can write your app in XAML and C#. You can start from scratch completely with a new template, a new Uno template, or you can import an existing UWP application or a library, plug Uno into it, and bring it across to different platforms. And that is something I'm going to show in a little bit. Actually, I'll show up next, where you can actually take older UWP applications and bring them back to life to new platforms. And so I don't know if I want to answer the questions yet. Yeah, I mean, we might as well look at the questions. So I have see a lot of them about Xamarin. So how do you compare it with Xamarin? I see the comparison with Xamarin. Would you provide more? Would it be possible to compare Xamarin Blue? Okay, so basically all the same thing. So we get asked this question quite a bit, obviously, because we're both .NET cross-platform framework solutions. And basically, the first thing to clarify is really regarding Xamarin Forms and Xamarin Classic. Since Uno itself is sitting on top of .NET, and for Android and iOS, we are and macOS, we are sitting on top of this classic pure Xamarin to have, like, we have like Mono running, and we're running .NET, and we're building this stuff using C#. So that's using Xamarin itself. But the easiest way to understand the difference is, what is the philosophy between Uno Platform and Xamarin Forms? So what's the philosophy, or I guess the starting point? And so Uno taps into a different ecosystem compared to Xamarin Forms or Maui going forward, multi-app user. I'm just going to call it Maui. We believe WinUI has, so it taps into a different ecosystem. So we believe that WinUI has the richest, which is developed by Microsoft. WinUI has the richest API set and styling engine, and therefore merits being brought to all platforms that .NET runs on, including the web and Linux, to create pixel-perfect applications on all platforms that we target. And so Maui, I feel, starts from like a different starting point. It's the successor of Xamarin Forms, which itself started as an abstraction layer on top of Xamarin for iOS and Xamarin for Android. And then it expanded to become an abstraction across other platforms, of which Windows is just one of those. And so we started Uno when we weren't satisfied with the experience that produced us. So back in the day, Uno was started, while Xamarin Forms was in its very early infancy, or I'm not sure if it was, I'm not even sure at the timeline exactly there. But for many people, that's good enough. And Xamarin Forms is you can be very successful with it, and it is very useful. And we don't really like to be seen as like in competition with them, really. It's just, we have two different branches that we're going around trying to solve, I guess, the same problem. And it is easy to compare the two, obviously. But to summarize, the biggest differentiators would be platform-wise. Uno supports out of the box, without any additional frameworks or bindings, the web as a target, which we really find is very important. So you can use the XAML that you know, and also Uno apps running on Linux. And I know that's also in the conversation now with Maui. And so feature-wise, Uno inherits everything that .NET provides, and it's also bringing the WinUI XAML and everything that the Windows team has worked on, such as accessibility, keyboard input, and focus, and things like that. So the really big differentiator is that we believe that the WinUI XAML, since Xamarin Forms or the Maui XAML, is different than the WinUI XAML. We believe that the WinUI framework is really the one that we would like to see being brought universally to all other platforms as well. So I hope I answered some sort of the questions. Can I use Prism with? Yes, you can. You can use Prism. There are templates. There are Uno Prism templates that you can just .NET new, and it'll boot up. It'll have a ready-made Uno app with Prism installed in it, ready to go. How's the startup time and runtime performance of Uno? I don't know. I don't have numbers, I guess, but it's good. I mean, we're always working on performance. We have people much smarter than me working on performance, doing crazy things, and especially we're getting, with the evolution of things like Maui even, and with .NET 6 coming and everything, and all that, all those crazy features that they're working on, the .NET team is. We're getting all those performance improvements as well, because we're sitting on top of .NET for these things. So it's really like we're riding this wave of all these performance improvements that are coming to .NET on all these new platforms. And so and we have things that we're dealing with. So things for WebAssembly and stuff, we do ahead of time compilation, profile guided AOT. I don't know what all these terms always mean, but it's good stuff, and it definitely helps performance for sure. Okay, I want to get back to this demo because I think it's really cool. Basically, I was playing around with the Surface Duo. I think it's the Surface Duo. So basically, Microsoft's Android phone that has dual screens, and it opens like a book sort of. And I thought it would be really cool to get like a Pokedex app on it running, because it looks like a Pokedex, and you could use it as one. You have the Pokemon on one side, and you have the detail page on one, and blah blah blah. And so my original thought was like, okay, let's just make an Android app, I guess. And then I thought about using Uno for this, and I didn't want to do a lot of the work because I'm lazy. So I figured if I use Uno, I could find an already working UWP application and just bring it to Android myself. And so that's what I did. So I went on GitHub, I found this by Discloser, this app called Dexer. And basically, it's just, it was untouched for 4 or 5 years. So it was like a 5-year-old application that hadn't been touched on GitHub. And I pulled down the code. I plugged Uno into it and the solution. You just move, and I'll show you the structure of an Uno app in a second, but you just basically move the UWP code into the shared code. So it's shared across all the platforms. And it was working, and it was running on Android. And so I could show it to you if I figure out how to do. So I have the Surface Duo emulator. I hope you can see the emulator right now. But basically, this is the Surface Duo emulator, and this is the Pokemon app. So, or the Pokedex app, sorry. So this is a 5-year-old untouched UWP application that Uno got plugged into, and now it's running natively on Android. And you can see, so it just has the picture of the Pokemon, and if I bring that to, both screens, it's slow. There you go. So basically, it has the selected Pokemon here, and then as I select different Pokemon, the Pokemon shows up on the right. So I have a little Pokedex app now, and you can imagine holding this, as on the Surface Duo. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I thought it would be a good opportunity as well to showcase sort of the anatomy of an Uno app. So if we look, this is Dex Uno. And so this is what an Uno app looks like for the most part. So you have your platform heads here. So your CS proj for each platform that you want to target. And these are the ones that you're getting for free out of the box with Uno. So you have your WebAssembly, you have your Skier for WPF, your Skier for Linux, macOS, iOS, and Android. And you're getting all these just because I plugged in, my Visual Studio is really weird, so some of the projects aren't loading. And then you have your UWP head here. So this was the only thing that basically existed before I plugged Uno into it. And if you were to look now inside the UWP head, there's nothing really in it. It's empty. And for the most part, everything else is empty on the platform heads as well, except some of the main activity and the main bootstrapping stuff that exists for Android, say. And so everything that you need for this application, so all the business logic, all the UI, everything exists now, or I guess all the UI code and everything for Uno and presentation logic exists now in this shared library. And if you haven't seen shared projects before, it's an SH proj, not a CS proj, and it doesn't compile down to its own binary or anything like that. It's just a bucket of shared files that different CS projects will reference and have access to. And so it's basically, this is all shared code that goes to the iOS head, to the Android head, to the UWP head. And so this is where all the presentation logic is. This is where all the views are. All my pages are in here. If we open up, pages, you see all my XAMLs here in my shared project. And one of the things I really love is this assets folder. And so you don't have to deal, I'm getting ahead of myself in my slides, but basically you don't have to deal with things like, let me just open this and show you. You don't have to deal with things like, what am I trying to say? You don't have to deal with things like Android's density folders, like having your assets. You don't have to put them in the Android CS proj and put them in the MDPI, HDPI, XHDPI folders. You don't have to deal with creating image asset bundles for iOS and the iOS head and dealing with the @2x, @3x sizes and stuff for different pixel densities and everything like that. Basically, your assets all live in your shared folder under assets, and you can see all my Pokemon images are here. And if I wanted to have again, like those scaling things like HDPI, MDPI, I would just have scale suffix. So I would have like a 10.scale-100, scale-200, scale-300, like you would for a UWP application. And Uno will automatically take those and place the resources in the assets folder into the right places when it compiles for the platform heads that you're building. So I thought that was pretty cool. And it does the same thing. I don't have localized strings here, but the same idea. You don't have to deal with the strings.xml or the p lists for iOS and Android. You just, within your shared common project, you have your normal resources.resw file that you would have for like a Windows app. And that is all done for you and translated to the proper places it needs to go for the proper platforms at build time. So basically, the only thing I needed to add to get this dual screen working, because this wasn't a dual screen application in the first place, was this WinUI component called the two-pane view, which, oh, my computer is slow, which pane 1 has that pivot, so has that list of Pokemon with different categories that you can swipe to. And pane 2, oh boy, my computer is not liking this at all. Pane 2 just has the Pokemon detail page, which again is just a page here in the, if we go to the Pokemon detail page. So it's just a page here. We have a command bar, an app bar. Oh boy. Oh my God, it's super slow. Anyway, so we have a scroll viewer. We have like, this is WinUI code or UWP code that hasn't been touched. And I just plugged it in and plugged Uno in, and this is all being translated to the proper native views and native widgets on each platform. Yeah. So Visual Studio is struggle busing today. Okay. So that is Dex Uno. And so I mentioned the Fluent UI design system a couple times. And so basically this is Microsoft's UI design language or design UI cookbook. I don't know. It's a design system that comes baked into Uno Platform. So every time that you start a new app with Uno, you'll be able to get access to the Fluent UI design system and have it run and look the same across all platforms. So same idea as like a material design. This is Microsoft's version of that. But we also do have material design available. And again, it's across all platforms. So if you wanted to style your app in a specific way, in the Fluent way or in the material way, these are ready-made styles for you that will make your app look the same across all the platforms. Doesn't matter which platform you're running on, because of the strong use of those lookless controls, that control templating that comes with WinUI. And so you get this nice Fluent UI design system or this material design, or even you can style your app in the Cupertino way now. There's a Uno Cupertino library as well. So it gives you a Apple iOS-y, macOS-y type of feel for your applications as well. Yeah, and so a way to sort of showcase that native support for the Fluent UI and material and Cupertino as well. There's this Uno Gallery app that exists. And so basically it allows you to see all controls that are readily supported, readily supported with these themes, to be able to toggle between the Fluent material, the Cupertino theme, the toggle between light and dark. You can copy the XAML markup that's there right from the Gallery app and bring it into your own app, and it runs everywhere. So it's an app to showcase Uno that is built with Uno. And you can see it, you can also see how you can style your apps to rely on native control rendering. So giving you full control if you do want to have like a per platform look for some of your widgets or some of your views. Yes, you can style your application, like I said, the same across all platforms, or you can allow the platform to render itself out how it normally would and give that native look as well for each platform. You do have that control. So we could look quickly at the Uno gallery just for fun. Oh no, that's another sample. Okay, so this is the Uno gallery. It's styled in the material design sort of style in the first place. It has a WinUI navigation view on the right with hierarchical navigation. It has the toggles for material and Fluent. So you can see we have the material buttons, we have the material text boxes, check boxes, toggle switches, all that fun stuff. And you could switch it to be the Fluent designs instead. So it has that Microsofty feel, as well as Cupertino isn't live right now in this gallery build, but it's there. And if you were running this on like an Android phone or an iOS phone or device, you would have another toggle called native, where Uno is just sort of stepping out of the way and letting the native rendering control how the views look. Yeah, so this is built with Uno. This is a WebAssembly application that's running in the browser right now, built with C# and XAML. So if I were to refresh this after going to the network page, refresh. So you see coming down the pipe all these .clr files. Like even system.json, you see there's some good stuff. Here we go. Whoa. Sorry. There you go. So you see the .NET, like you see .NET coming down the pipe over the network and being run as a WebAssembly, a contained WebAssembly application. So this is running true like C# code natively in the browser. And if you were to look, here it is. There's the Uno UI library coming down the pipe, Uno material library. So everything that's styling this application right now is coming from that .clr file, which I think like they're DLLs, but I think it's like to get around firewall stuff that it's .clr instead of .dll. But yeah, I thought that'd be fun to see. And so, like I mentioned before, Uno was originally created to address cross-plat development for Android and iOS all the way back in 2013, which at the time, you know, Xamarin Forms, everything was in early days. So we thought we wanted to build something that could really, like we had a large .NET team, basically, and we wanted to use those skills for their C# and XAML skills and allow them to build multi-platform applications. And so a lot of professional apps were created for Android and iOS back then using Uno, or whatever it was called back then. And a lot of professional applications are still being created with Uno today. So it's out, like Uno is out there in the wild in production, you know, it is production ready. And so around 2018, we saw what was happening with WebAssembly. And so I mentioned WebAssembly a few times, and I forgot to explain what it is. So WebAssembly is a way of running all types of code, not just JavaScript, in the browser natively. So it runs within the security model of the browser. So there are no security problems like there were with third-party solutions like Silverlight or Flash. And so at that time in 2018, .NET or Mono was being brought to WebAssembly by the Xamarin team. And so we thought, let's try and run Uno in the browser, since we're sitting on top of .NET, on top of Mono, depending on which platforms we're doing, right? And so Uno was running in the browser using WebAssembly that year, and we open sourced around that same time as well. And since then, there have been a plethora of developments. So over the years, you know, we added lots of new stuff. So there's reactive UI, there's Sync Fusion integration, there's Windows 7 WebAssembly migration. And as we go through, you know, we added more and more features. We added new platforms as well. So we added macOS, we added Linux. We added material and Fluent UI design systems, and continuing on into this year with 3.5 that has already been released. 3.6 has already been released, so I need to update this. I didn't get the latest. If there's the marketing person is in this call, they're gonna be mad at me. I didn't get the latest slide, but and as WinUI 3 comes out in Project Reunion, if you haven't heard of it, with basically is releasing the WinUI 3 library. As those features and those capabilities and those enhancements come out, we are going to have support for those on day 0 is what we shoot for with our releases as well, to basically bring all those features of WinUI 3 to all these platforms going forward. And so, like I mentioned, we're sitting on top, or not we're sitting on top, we're stretching this WinUI framework across all these new platforms that are going above and beyond Windows. And because we are using WinUI, this WinUI framework, we're getting all this great XAML support and everything that you get for free when you build Windows apps. You get this now when you're building iOS apps or Android apps or web apps or Linux apps. So you get that control template that I mentioned before. You get that ability to have a rich native widget that you get to touch and use, and you have that integration with the operating system itself, but you also have the free range to template it and make it look however you like. So you have styling and theming, like I mentioned. You do have conditional XAML capabilities with Uno Platform. So in your XAML code, in your markup code for your UI, you can tag things to say this is iOS specific, or this is not Android specific, like anything but Android, or WebAssembly specific. I want this margin to be like 10, but on Android I want it to be 20. You can do all those things like that. Native controls integration as well. You could just drop native controls in animations, data binding, shapes and brushes. So you have all these things that you have from WinUI. They're available on these platforms, on the new platforms that we support as well. And like I mentioned before, so there's those localizations and those image assets are added only once in that shared project, and you can add scale suffix or lang suffixes to your assets to localize them or scale them properly, and everything's dealt for you and brought into the proper resource files and folders at compile time. As well as the strings as well. Like I mentioned, you don't have to deal with the plist or the Android strings at XML. You just put your localized strings in one place and it's used everywhere. And so at Uno, we're a big believer in automated UI testing. So for UI-driven applications, the highest level of confidence you can have in testing is having an automated way of actually interacting with your application. And so we created the Uno.UI test framework, which is based on the Xamarin.UI test framework for iOS and Android, and Selenium for WebAssembly. So it's basically a unified way of defining tests and running them for every supported platform. And like Uno, it's free, it's open source, and it's used by Uno itself to test and verify our builds. So just a little look. This is just a GIF of a WebAssembly application that's being automatically tested. On the right here, it looks, if you're familiar with Xamarin UI test, it looks very, very familiar. So, you interact with the application as you would. We have certain helper methods like wait for dependency property value for your controls and things like that. So it's a really nice tool for UI testing your application. And so Skia Sharp support for WebAssembly. If you don't know what Skia is an open source 2D graphics library. So it's extremely powerful, it's extremely efficient and fast. And it's really good for like rendering around any sort of 2D graphics that you can imagine. And it's available out of the box with Skia Sharp. So Skia Sharp on its own, you don't have to have like a special Uno Skia Sharp build or whatever. You get Skia Sharp as you would, and you can use it inside your Uno apps. And so that's done through the SK XAML canvas view that we'll see in just a second. But like Skia Sharp, so any .NET Standard 2.0 library can be used with Uno. There's also a large third-party control support for things like Sync Fusion and Infragistics and others coming as well. And you can integrate with presentation frameworks, like was mentioned before, Prism, MVVM Cross, Reactive UI, the MVVM Lite toolkit, the new one, oh man, I'm blanking on it, but it's coming from the guys from the Windows Community Toolkit. There's the MVVM like toolkit basically that exists there, is all supported with Uno. So there's a lot of great integration and easy integration with any .NET Standard 2.0 library, really. And so I just wanted to do a quick example of some of the control vendor integration. So Infragistics, oh, is this one Infragistics? Yes. So Infragistics has basically creates very rich controls, a lot of like charts and stuff, but very rich and interactive controls. And I wanted to show support for that in Uno. So if we, so this is, and we'll show it in a second, but basically this is an Uno app that has an Infragistics control in it. Where the hell? Oh, here. Okay. And so basically it's using the SK XAML canvas, so that Skia canvas, to draw out what we're seeing here on the screen. And so we have this image, which what's going to happen is that anywhere on the image where I hover my mouse, it'll peak on the graph below the RGB values of whatever the color is that my mouse is on, and it'll be over time. So if I were to go and hover over, any part of the image, you see the graph peaking. And if I go over something red, you'll see the red value. I don't know, hopefully you can see that well. You can see the red value sort of peaking above everything else. And then we have this nice crosshair sort of view. And this is on a debug build, but it's still, because it's, I mean, it's just still running really quickly and really well. And so it has those nice crosshair values so you can interact with the graph and all that fun stuff. So if we look quickly at the code, just for fun, there's not too much to see. But basically we have this Picture Explorer class. And so again, that was on the web. So that was the WebAssembly version of this, but it could have been run on Android and iOS, on macOS, so any of these. So this is an Uno application with all these platform heads available. And then again, you have that shared project with the assets and the strings that are shared across all your platform heads. And then you have this Picture Explorer class, which if you'll notice it's using that SK XAML canvas view, which is coming from Skia Sharp. So Skia Sharp, technically, it's Skia Sharp views UWP, but since we're taking UWP and we're stretching across to all these new platforms, you can use that one with Uno. And so, yeah, it hooks up to, the pointer moved, and it does all these fancy calculations that I don't understand. And then it plugs it into this XAML data chart. And it does all that fun stuff. And you can see the crosshair layer here, which is what we saw when we hovered over it, sort of those crosshairs to interpolate like all the values and stuff on the graph where your mouse was. So yeah, so I thought that was it's a very powerful control, and it's running really smoothly in the web. When it was originally developed, as you can see from, it was originally developed, I guess, for UWP, but we brought that to the web and to all other platforms. And yeah, and just as another sort of slide to push again that Uno really is out there in the wild. It's being used in production. It's being used by large partners. A lot of these are Canadian, but I'm sure you'll recognize some of them. But yeah, it's just to push home again that all the way back to 2013 till now, Uno has matured and grown in the wild, and it's out there, and it's being used today, and it's professionally supported and professionally built. And so for the future, so again, aligning with WinUI 3.0 updates, aligning with what they're coming out with all the feature improvements and new controls and new features. More supported controls. So the API surface is very large for WinUI. So there's always work to do to continue to, fill in all the holes and all the gaps. More platforms we'd love to integrate with, as well as always, improving performance is always at the forefront. So performance will always get better release after release, for sure. There's lots of work being done in all these aspects, and many more that I don't even know about. So just to wrap up, we love feedback. I'd love to know like what you want to see more of, see less of, whether you want some questions to be answered in the presentation or anything like that. So feel free to give as much feedback as possible at this URL. I hope it's still up to date. And if you do so, there is a course, a full-on course that's developed by Christopher Finley, I think, on Udemy that is really well done. Yeah, you can enter some feedback, and you'll enter for a chance to win that course, so you can get some Uno platform goodness. And so with that, I would love to answer any other questions or anything else. If there's also I should have put a slide here, but if you go to platform.uno, or sorry, if you go to our website, if you go to the Uno platform website, there should be a link to our Discord server, our Discord room, and it's a great place. The team is always there, answering questions. If you have anything, if you're just getting started, if you have a bug or whatever, it's always great, or an issue, it's always great to go in there and say hi and ask your question. There's always people on the team and engineers there that are ready and willing to help. So yeah, but thank you for having me. It was a great honor talking. Yeah, I'd love to, if there are any other questions, let me know. Oh, I didn't see the question, sorry. Is Microsoft going to buy Uno as Xamarin? Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. That's above my pay grade to know those things. No, but we're definitely in good partnerships with Microsoft. We work with them closely to get with WinUI, to know what we want to support, what we're going to be able to support with them. And and I think we align really well with, if you don't know what Project Reunion is, you should definitely look it up. It's basically Microsoft's goal to basically unify all these different application models and everything into one, and WinUI 3 is the beginning of that. So unifying the way you define Windows applications across different app types, but they want to bring that unification to more and more places, more platforms, more devices, all that stuff. So I think Uno really aligns with that well. Yeah, so what about using Playwright instead of Selenium? Playwright, I actually am not that super well versed in automated UI testing stuff. I'm assuming that's what it is. Yeah, I wasn't there for the decision to use Selenium, but that's the only one I know of, actually. So I'm not sure about that one. Control the photo as well. Yeah, curious if people are using this for AI or machine learning. Ooh, I don't know. I have no idea. But there are definitely like really cool projects that are being worked on. There's people here. I think I saw some people. I recognize some names. So there's people here that probably could answer that as well in the chat. I don't know. I can't see the chat. But there's definitely a lot of really cool projects that are being used with Uno. There's even games that people are building with Uno. So yeah, definitely, again, the Discord would be a really cool place to sort of ask questions like this, see what people are up to, see what people are building with Uno. Yeah, so yeah. That's all the questions I see, but feel free if there's anything else, or I'm not sure.
Awesome. Well, yeah, Steve, thanks so much for running through that. Definitely some awesome demos and content in there for sure. And I think as evidenced by, a bunch of questions coming in throughout that whole thing, that's always a good sign that, you're presenting awesome stuff and people are interested. So really appreciate everyone asking questions. If you have anything kind of last minute, feel free to throw it in the Q&A while I'm kind of going through this last spiel, but otherwise, we can I think I saw you have an alert come up, saying what time you have to wake up and be at work in the morning. So at some point we should definitely let you go. But really appreciate you taking the time to chat, especially, being a few hours, east of us. But yeah, so we'll get the recording of this up over the next few days. I'll blast it out in all the normal places of Meetup and Twitter and all that good stuff. And keep an eye out for upcoming schedule of new sessions that we definitely hope to see you at. But in the meantime, thanks again, Steve. Really, really awesome stuff. And thanks for everyone for attending and asking questions. Hope everyone is staying safe and healthy and starting to have some success with vaccine appointments and all that good stuff. And we'll hope to see you real soon. Have a great night, folks.